Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video will be entitled CIA Cielo Drive. Of course, I'm referring to the August 9th, 1969 NATO Gladio murders of five people on a property with 3 dogs and a pool boy who were unharmed. So, in other words, what I'm saying is you have 9 people on the property, 3 of them being canine dogs, 1 dog being 85-pound German dog. So you have 6 human beings and 3 dogs. That's 9 creatures. 5 were murdered with an M16 rifle, semi-automatic setting, with NATO M7 bayonet attachment to the M16 using this locking device mechanism. Can be removed from the rifle at will. Anyway, that's what happened. Nobody's interested in talking about that. Everybody's fascinated by Charlie Miles Maddox, no-name Maddox, that they think his name is Manson, and his fake cult family, which the media has coined the Manson family, when there never was a Manson family. And if you believe there was, then you should get another booster shot with your vaccine, because you're a face diaper, COVID-believing poppycock machine. And by the way, COVID stands for Certification of Vaccine Identification. It's called the Vax Passport system. It means you're part of the digital bank obedience currency money system. That's how dumb you are. If you went out and volunteered for cancer, you are techno-enslaved. Yes, you are. Don't get mad at me. My channel is about popping the bubbles. There is no tooth fairy. There's no Santa Claus. You're not going to vote for Ron DeSantis and vote your way out of this problem. You're not going to vote for Robert Francis Kennedy Jr. and get your way out of this problem. You're not going to be able to send tens of thousands of dollars to RFK, Hollywood CIA, and his wife Cheryl Hines, the PCR purveyor poppycock machine. You're not going to get any salvation supporting those charlatans, because they're involved with subterfuge. They're involved with the art of deception. We don't have a democracy, so if you pretend to run for president and that your vote counts and your vote matters and that the president has authority to make executive decisions, you've been punked. We live under maritime law, admiralty law, the law of the sea, military law. We live at the point of a bayonet. And if you want to live in denial, you go ahead and send money to Robert Kennedy or to Ronnie DeSantis or to Gavin Newsom, or you can hook up with steroid beauty queen Arnold Schwarzenegger and try to see if you can find Nancy Pelosi. Where are you, Nancy Pelosi? And Barbara Boxer and Diane Goldman Feinstein. Where are you? Where are you, Andrew Cuomo? Where are you? Save me! Dorothy! Help me, Dorothy! All right, so here are 5 crisis actors. They're the primary crisis actors in the Manson family fake cover-up of a NATO crime, NATO felony crime. I'm going to set the Waverly Drive murders of Lino and LaBianca and Rosemary LaBianca. I'm going to set that aside. That has a lot in common with Cielo Drive, but there's just not enough time for me to do this video and do both crime scenes. So I'm just going to focus on the Cielo Drive scene. Now, at both scenes, the reality is there are no eyewitnesses to having seen any murders. There are no ear witnesses to hearing any murders. Hear no evil, see no evil. That's the situation at both crime scenes. All right? Now, what you should know is obviously there is no way that a non-military person can get on this property. It's military-owned, controlled property, and that means 360-degree perimeter. All the homes in 360-degree pattern around the murder scene are military controlled. So there's no Ford Fairlane driving up the driveway to cut some wires and disable the gate. That's impossible. Now, can NATO soldiers with permission go on that property? Absolutely they can. And they can even rehearse down the hill at the Doppelganger twin home at 10048 Cielo Drive. You have the entire crime scene is duplicated just below the actual crime scene, which is a porn set and homicide scene. The main crisis actor starts out with Seymour Kott, who is in his 40s, appears to be in his 40s, doing an interview with NBC News the Saturday morning of August 9th, 1969, after Winifred Chapman has discovered the bodies. She's the fake housekeeper, Winifred Chapman. She's another crisis actor, CIA, scripted, poppycock, fake housekeeper. Anyway, Seymour Kott allegedly just moved in. He's a renter, not an owner, of 10070 170 Cielo Drive, which is the first house you come to closest to the gate, to that cyclone fence gate that was disabled. And he lives there, according to NBC News, with Mrs. Kott, spelled K-O-T-T. I'll give you the video link. Mrs. Kott really isn't Mrs. Kott. She's really Ethel Fisher, who lived in the same apartment building in Greenwich Village with Robert De Niro's parents. And it appears that Robert De Niro's mother worked for CIA. Robert De Niro's mother, which explains how Robert De Niro got a job in acting, because he's not a very good actor. He just plays the same character in every film, if you haven't noticed. Robert De Niro is pretty much the same badass in every film, except when he flips to comedy. You know, kind of like Joe Pesci does. Joe Pesci, Robert De Niro, it's the same guy. Anyway, in other words, he's not multidimensional. All right, he's not Marlon Brando, and he's not Sir Laurence Olivier, and he's not Orson Welles. He's Robert De Niro. All right, so Seymour Kott does an interview and he claims that he and his wife, whose name is Ethel Fisher, whose maiden name is Blankfield because she's Jewish, right? So I have a feeling that Seymour Kott is Jewish. But anyway, so that would make sense. You'd have Jewish crisis actors on the scene the next morning. And he claims that they were entertaining guests and that the guests left around midnight. And he didn't see or hear anything unusual. And when pressed, did he hear parties or rituals? He said, no, not really. I heard the meowing of kitty cats, but that was down in the canyon. He heard the meowing of kitty cats. He didn't hear the screaming of people being stabbed by bayonets. You do know that there were 103 bayonet puncture wounds, not counting defensive wounds. Actual lethal wounds, there's 102 lethal wounds. Potentially lethal wounds. In other words, if you don't get medical attention quick like a bunny rabbit, you're going to bleed out and die. That is an excessive amount. No one person can do 102 or 103 bayonet strikes. It's impossible. It's 102 bayonet strikes of 4 people. No one person can do that, okay? And you know what? 10 people couldn't do it. And if you didn't have a military bayonet, you couldn't do it. Cannot do it. You couldn't even do it with the buck knife. This weapon was found under the cushion of the sofa next to Sharon Tate's body, right? And this weapon had no blood on it, nor does the blade comport to the wound patterns that were in the medical exam. This weapon is too wide. This is a single-edge weapon. The M7 is double-edge and is 22 millimeters thick. This is 28 millimeters thick. This will not go through ribs unless you turn it at an angle or sideways, which you cannot do when your victim is fleeing, like two of the 4 victims were. Actually, 2 of the 5 victims were fleeing the scene. Make that 3 of 5 were fleeing. Stephen Parent was fleeing. He was shot 4 times with the M16 rifle, which the media wants you to believe was a 22 caliber pistol. Nope, it was a semi-automatic rifle, M16, which can handle the 22 slug. And that's probably what was used. I have a feeling M16 slugs were used, but they call them 22s for the purposes of propaganda. Everything was very professionally done at Cielo Drive. Not an amateur murder at all. You have a 19-year-old pool boy. You have 3 dogs, one of which is a 85-pound German dog. That's 4 creatures, all pacified or chloroformed and unharmed. Then you have 5 people on the property brutally murdered. There is no way a hippie or hippies can handle pacifying 3 people while simultaneously murdering 5. But if your brain is the size of a peanut, you won't understand that. You won't get it. You'll just believe whatever the media tells you. You wait for the command. The command that tells you what to believe. It was Charlie Manson. He did it. Even though we know he didn't do it. Even Vincent Bugliosi said Charlie Manson didn't do it, okay? Aaron Stovich never said Charlie Manson did it. He allegedly told somebody to go do it. What a bunch of baloney that is. When was the last time you went out and murdered 7 people because someone suggested you do that? Never. Like never. It's never happened in the history of the world. All right, so Seymour Kott, he comes on, basically the witness that didn't see anything, and he only heard the meowing of kitty cats. This does not corroborate that the murder happened, around midnight to 12:20 in the morning, which had been when he'd be awake, cleaning up his kitchen, saying goodbye to his guests, right? And then his wife, she doesn't go anywhere near the screen because she works for CIA, and her name is Ethel Fisher. So she never gets called at the trial. She doesn't appear in media. Only her husband, Seymour, does. Next door to them, there are only 2 houses on the basically long driveway that leads up to the murder house gate, and the other house is address number 10088 Cielo Drive. Maureen Serot, who appears to be 17 or 18 years old, she's interviewed by the same interviewer at NBC who interviews Seymour Kott. And she claims to be returning home to her stepfather's home at 10088 Cielo Drive. It has to be 1088 because even though she didn't say her address, there are only 2 homes, and Seymour Kott resides at 10070, and the only other house is 10088, and that's adjacent to that subject property. Anyway, she comes home at 1 o'clock. She doesn't get blocked at the bottom of the hill, which is where Linda Kasabian claims she parked the Ford Fairlane tuna boat sedan. So we know that wasn't parked there at 1 o'clock in the morning. We know that Seymour Kott didn't see it at midnight. So you have a 1-hour period where there's no Ford Fairlane anywhere along the driveway, at the bottom or at the top. In the court murder trial, Linda Kasabian says she drove the Ford Fairlane all the way up past Seymour Kott's house, turned right, came up to the gate, whereupon Charlie Watson, who's been renamed Tex for the purposes of psychops, that he climbed up this telephone pole and cut the 2 wires with wire cutters that we don't know where they are. There's no murder weapon, there's no wire cutters, and Tex Watson has a bad knee, which he injured in a motorcycle crash, which got him out of the draft in the United States Army. He wasn't going to be drafted into the military because he had a bum knee. So I don't believe he could climb up a telephone pole, and I don't believe he could cut any wires because he wasn't present. And neither was Linda Kasabian, she's pregnant, and she has a little boy. She's pregnant with a girl, and she has a little boy, like 18 months, and she's 19 years old. So she's going to say whatever they tell her to say. And Vogue magazine bought her dresses. 18 days on the witness stand, sponsored by Joan Didion of Vogue magazine. That's who bought the dresses for the fake witnesses at the Manson trial. And Seymour Kott didn't incriminate the Manson family, and he actually was not called to the murder trial because his testimony torpedoes the Linda Kasabian testimony. And so does Maureen Serot's testimony, where she never saw Linda Kasabian and she never saw the Ford Fairlane. So they don't corroborate the poppycock story. They actually exonerate that story. That story is fake. It cannot be corroborated. It's untrue. It's untrue if you can't prove it. And the Linda Kasabian testimony cannot be substantiated. It cannot be corroborated. And in fact, it was proven not to be true by 2 witnesses who were living on the driveway where she was walking and driving that car. Because she claims she came back up the driveway on foot and then returned on foot. So that's 2 times she walked up the driveway and down the driveway. And 1 time she drove up and drove down the driveway. That's 4 trips on that driveway. And I got 2 witnesses that never saw anything like that. So I'm going to say Linda Kasabian's testimony was false. It was suborned perjury. Then we have the fake housekeeper, Winifred Chapman, who apparently was on the property on Friday all day cleaning. And she left at 4 p.m. with the landscaping Latino crew. It's 2 men, 2 Latinos. She left. They took her down to Santa Monica Boulevard to the bus station, to the bus stop, where she took the bus 16 miles back home to where she lives in downtown Los Angeles, south of downtown proper. She would have to take 2 buses. She'd have to do a transfer to get there. She claims to a return to the property at 8:30 in the morning, Saturday morning. This is poppycock, people. She spent the entire Friday at the property. No one is going to be at the property on Saturday. Abigail Folger is getting on a 10 a.m. United Airlines flight to San Francisco. She's leaving the property by 7 o'clock in the morning, 7:30 at the latest, and she won't be there. Sharon Tate and Tom Coomer are going to go back to his place in the Jean Harlow home at 9820 Easton Drive, which is about a mile away. They're not going to stay there. And then Wojtek, he's going to go back to Laurel Canyon to 2776 Woodstock Road, where he lives. Over by Frank Zappa, that's where he lives. Over by Inger Stevens, that's where Wojtek Frykowski, who works for CIA and is a Polish CIA agent. Winifred Chapman, she allegedly discovers the bodies, then she turns around and runs to the first house she comes to, of course, is Seymour Kott's house. She knocks on the door there. Nobody answers. It's after 8:30 a.m. I don't know what Seymour Kott is doing. He must be hung over from his party, I guess. He heard the meowing of kitty cats, then he slept like a log, right? So he doesn't answer the door. So then she goes next door, and there's only one house, which would be where Maureen Serot lives, which is 10088 Cielo Drive. But since Maureen Serot didn't go to bed before 1 a.m., I'm assuming that that is why the little Boy Scout answered the door, and his name is Jim Assam, which I'm assuming is the stepfather for Seymour. The stepfather for Maureen Serot is Jim Assan's father, biological father. Anyway, Jim Assan is Law Enforcement Troop 800 for the Boy Scouts of America. He greets Winifred Chapman at his father's house, and he calls police, whereupon 6 black and white Los Angeles police cars respond, even though it's in Beverly Hills. I don't know how many of the black and whites were Beverly Hills police and how many were Los Angeles. We don't have that information. We do know there's a photograph showing a United States Army colonel leaving the Cielo Drive murder scene at the exact moment that 2 forensic people with their kits, their luggage, is walking onto the property. A military NATO officer has already been there and is leaving. That's how another reason you know it's a NATO murder is, why is an Army NATO officer on the property before the forensics team arrives? I guess he has special clearance, right? So Winifred Chapman is a fake housekeeper, and she's a crisis actor for CIA. After she does her little routine where she tells the police this ridiculous story of how she discovered the bodies but didn't stop in her tracks when she allegedly saw Stephen Parent slumped over the back of his seat in his Ford's Ambassador Rambler sedan, 2-door. Isn't that interesting that the car has the same name as Robert Francis Kennedy's Ambassador Hotel on Wilshire Boulevard? The Ambassador sedan and the Ambassador Hotel. I don't think that's an accident. But anyway, so you got a housekeeper who sees a dead boy, but she keeps on going to the house where she knows there's a hideaway key and goes in and then discovers Sharon Tate, Tom Coomer, Wojtek Frykowski, and then flees the home. I don't know if she saw Abigail Folger on the lawn or Wojtek Frykowski out on the lawn, but she then encounters Jim Assam, who's a Boy Scout. He's 15 years old. So I've got Winifred Chapman, who at the time, she's 48 years old. I've got Seymour Kott, who appears to be about 48 years old. And then I've got Maureen Serot. She appears to be 17 or 18 years old. I've got those 4 people. I've got the wife of Seymour Kott, Ethel Fisher. She's nowhere in the story. And then the media and Vincent Bugliosi's Helter Skelter book tell you that she claims she heard screaming, around 12:30 in the morning. But she never testified to that under oath, and she works for CIA, and she lived with Robert De Niro's parents in Greenwich Village. By the way, that's where Bernard Goetz lived, in the same apartment building as Janis Joplin's publicist, Myrna Friedman. So I got Myrna Friedman, Bernard Goetz, I've got Seymour Kott's wife, all living in Greenwich Village with Robert De Niro's parents. You think that's a coincidence mathematically? that you'd have Janis Joplin's publicist. It appears that Janis Joplin was murdered 1 year later in West Hollywood, and that we have Sharon Tate murdered. And we have all these CIA crisis actors telling you what to believe about Bernard Goetz and the subway shooting on a Saturday morning at around 11 o'clock. Give me a break. Give me a break. Muggings occur, after 10 p.m. at night on weekdays when there are very few people in the car. They don't happen during a busy Saturday. But anyway, that's what they want you to believe, and Myra Friedman of the CIA is going to tell you how to believe it, because she works for the New Yorker. So it's all CIA-controlled messaging. Okay, so then I've got the last crisis fake witness of the Manson family is Stephen Weiss, who's age 11, and he lives at 3627 Longview Valley Road in Sherman Oaks, which is code for Encino. He lives very close to the border of Encino. He's right above the Stephen Twitch Boss murder scene, Phil Hartman, Burn Hartman murder scene. He's 3.8 miles away from Twitch Boss. He's 4 miles from Phil Hartman. He lives at the second to last house on a cul-de-sac, which is called Longview Valley Road, right below Beverly Glen Boulevard. And then we have this poppycock story that Charlie Watson threw this Ronald Reagan replica pistol out of the car, and it landed in the backyard of Stephen Weiss's house. I'm going to call poppycock all around on this story. If you look at that home, it's a dump. And I don't even think they have a sprinkler system in the back. But that was the story originally, was that Stephen was working on a sprinkler head. At age 11, my father didn't want me going anywhere near the sprinkler heads. I did, but I would just play with them and try different sprinkler patterns. I didn't disassemble them. I didn't attempt to fix my sprinkler heads. They weren't broken. Anyway, that was the story, that Stephen Weiss was working in the backyard at age 11 on a sprinkler head, and he found this Ronald Reagan replica gun, which then was later attributed to Charles Watson. It doesn't make any difference if it was Ronald Reagan's pistol. It doesn't make any difference if it belonged to Charlie Watson, which there's no proof that it did. There's no proof that it's Ronald Reagan's gun either. It's true that Ronald Reagan used a pistol like that in his Western films. There's no photographs of Charlie Watson using a gun like that or owning a gun like that. But it doesn't make any difference if they did or they didn't. See, that's called deductive reasoning. The gun was tested for ballistics, and it didn't match the 7 slugs pulled out of the 3 victims at the Cielo crime scene. So it doesn't make any difference. It's a prop. It wasn't used in the murder. So when you have a gun that's not used in the murder, it should never be admitted as evidence of the crime in the trial. But it was. Judge Older of the OSS and the Flying Tigers and the Burma opium facility shooting down Japanese planes before World War II Pearl Harbor happened. The judge in the Manson family was killing Japanese pilots before Pearl Harbor. And he admitted a gun that was not used in the murder of Sharon Tate or Stephen Parent or Tom Coomer or Wojtek Frykowski. So it's a prop. And it's a planted prop. It was planted in Stephen Weiss's backyard. And he lives in a CIA zip code. And he's Jewish. And they found this buck knife, and it wasn't used. It doesn't match the wound pattern. There was no DNA or blood evidence on it. There were 36 fingerprints found at the crime scene. 5 of her smudged, 31 did not match the victims. They did not match Charlie Watson. They didn't match Susan Krenwinkel or Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, or Linda Kasabian. No match. Fingerprints don't match. So the question is, well, who do they belong to? Did the murderers leave those 31 fingerprints? So that was not admitted as evidence at the trial because they don't support the poppycock story. You have a single footprint supposedly belonging to Susan Atkins, which is ridiculous because if she was barefoot on a murder scene, you would have hundreds of footprints, not one. Then you have one Patricia Krenwinkel pinky print on the door to the swimming pool out the master bedroom. That's implausible. And then you have Tex Watson's right ring finger under the door jamb of the front door at Cielo. Nobody would put their finger in the door jamb, for God's sakes. You'd crush your finger. You can't open a door that way. It makes no sense whatsoever. There were a pair of eyeglasses, prescription eyeglasses, found adjacent to the steamer trunks for Sharon Tate, they were not admitted into evidence because they don't belong to any of the defendants. They don't belong to any of the victims. They sort of kind of look like some eyeglasses that Art Linklater's third child, Robert Linklater, owned a pair that kind of look like that kind of look like what the Zodiac killer used in Presidio Heights on October 11th, 1969. Kind of sort of looks like those horn rim frames. Doesn't make any difference. It wasn't admitted to the trial. So my question is, why was a buck knife that wasn't used in the murder admitted into the murder trial? Why was a .22 caliber Ronald Reagan replica pistol admitted to the trial when those two weapons were not used? And the answer is because it's to psych out the jury and to psych out you, the media sheeple who believe the poppycock. Because that does not implicate Charlie Watson. It doesn't implicate Susan Atkins. It doesn't implicate Patricia Krenwinkel. It doesn't implicate Charlie Manson, whose name is Miles Maddox. So, if you don't get that, you have a pea brain. And Winifred Chapman, she went missing for 17 days after this discovery of the bodies. And then when the police located her 17 days after she went bye-bye, they sent her to UCLA Medical Center for psychological observation for several weeks so that they could rehabilitate her for the grand jury testimony to implicate the Manson family, which was done the first week in December 1969. But it took Winifred Chapman 17 days of going missing and another 2 weeks of psychiatric counseling to be able to repeat the poppycock of how she discovered these bodies and how she was the Polanski housekeeper when she wasn't. She's the fake housekeeper. And Roman Polanski doesn't live there, and neither does Sharon. So, and they're not even married. So knock it off with the poppycock. That's my crisis actor today. I got Stephen Weiss, age 11, poppycock, fake, phony, CIA crisis actor who lives on a cul-de-sac in a CIA area, and he's Jewish. Then I got Seymour Kott, who I think's Jewish, and his wife's Jewish. And they testify that Linda Kasabian's story didn't happen. And then I got Maureen Serot, and she testifies that the Linda Kasabian driving the Ford Fairlane never happened. So they're not called at the murder trial. Then I got the little boy, Jim Assam, and he calls the police when the Winifred Chapman fake housekeeper approaches him at 10088 Cielo Drive, which is Bella Drive, but they've renamed it Cielo Drive for purposes of your discussion. Nowhere in this story is the discussion of the Doppelganger twin home directly below. No discussion of Sunbrook Drive, which has 4 homes, including Timothy Leary, resides down from the pool house. Why wouldn't the police interview all the homeowners or the tenants? Because none of these homes are owned by anybody. I can go on and on. There's more crisis fake stories in the Manson fake trial. I don't have time to get into it. But anyway, that's my story for today. Please hit the like and subscribe. Feel free to share my videos. But NATO Gladio teams murdered CIA operative Sharon Tate and Abigail Folger, Wojtek Frykowski, Tom Coomer, that you think is Jay Sebring. And appears that Stephen Parent might have just been in the wrong place, wrong time. And Lino LaBianca, again, CIA private banker, money launderer for straight Satans. They were all taken out because they were all resigning from duty, and you cannot resign under maritime law. It's not allowed. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.